House coverage continues live with Ohio Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown. He'll be participating in a roundtable discussion on jobs and the economy, speaking to voters and supporters in Hampton Falls, New Hampshire. You're watching live coverage on C-SPAN.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rennie Cushing, and I'm the state representative from here in Hampton, and I'm also the moderator of the Winnicott School District. So this is 2 nights in a row that I've been in this building, and I want to thank everyone who turned out for this school district meeting last night. This is what I refer to as the band room. It's now the lecture hall, and it's good to see people that I went to high school with here still. I want to welcome you here tonight for this conversation we're going to have. During this week in the legislature, there are hearings on family medical leave insurance, which is something we've been talking about in the legislature for the past 2 sessions. And I'm honored to be asked by the folks for a family-friendly economy to welcome you here. And I want to introduce our guest from Ohio, Senator Sherrod Brown, who's going to say a few words, and then we're going to have a conversation.
I turn it to you, right? Cool. Okay, thanks. Always like 306. Okay, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time in New Hampshire since I was at, I believe, if I remember right, in Manchester and at Plymouth State University with first with Senator Shaheen, campaigning with her in 2014, and then with her husband. We went on to a couple other sites. So thank you, and thanks for when I first introduced my wife, Connie Schultz. And Connie and I will not say much. I want to hear from the panelists, of course. And we are in the midst of of something we call our Dignity of Work tour. Since Election Day 2018, I was reelected to my 3rd term in the Senate. I have continually been noticing that Democrats seem to think you either choose to talk to the progressive base or you talk to working families and listen to issues that matter to them. And I don't think it's a choice. I think we have to do both. We don't win states in general elections like New Hampshire or Ohio to swing states unless we talk to workers and to progressives. And I'm a longtime progressive, but I went in a state like Ohio because who I am and what I fight for every day is the dignity of work. And if you love your country, you fight for people who make it work, regardless of kind of work they do, whether you shower before or after work, understanding that whatever challenges people that look like me have in the workplace, people of color and women have greater challenges. And one of them is we fight for higher wages and better benefits. We also fight for better workplace rules, and we fight for pro-family policies. And what this legislature is doing, Senator Sherman and others, in moving this governor in the right place, getting Governor Sununu to actually do the right thing on family policies like this is so important. So I thank those in the House and those in the Senate that are working on these issues, and I want to be part of this as we work to advance these issues, family issues, in Congress, in the House and Senate. And congratulations on electing a new member of Congress from New Hampshire, too, and re-electing Annie, and continuing to have the 2 terrific female senators. And I think you all know this, but the only 2 women ever in American history to be governors and senators are serving you right now in this great state. And Ohio's still working to have a progressive woman governor or senator one of these days. So thank you for blazing the trail. And Jan, you start, right?
All right.
Thanks for what you do for the labor movement.
Thank you.
So I'm
Thank you,
here
Senator.
This is a listening tour, so I'm going to listen. So go for it.
Well, welcome. And welcome to all of you for joining us tonight for our discussion. My name is Jan Schaefer. I live in Warner, New Hampshire, and I'm recently retired from the staff of the National AFL-CIO, which is the Federation of Unions. And since my retirement, I have been working with the campaign for a family-friendly economy to help pass family and medical leave in New Hampshire. And I am really passionate about this issue, both because I have had family and medical leave, but I have also not had it. When my son was born, I did not have it. It was 26 years ago. But more recently, I had the good fortune to have a union contract, and that provided for paid family medical leave, and I was able to be with my mother when she died, which was an incredible gift, and it would have been more than stressful to have to try and balance work and taking care of a parent like that. So I am really excited that Senator Brown is joining us tonight. He's a leader on issues of importance to working families. He's spent his time in the U.S. Senate relentlessly advocating for us, and I'm so happy that he could be here.
Thank you, Jane,
so welcome again.
Thank you.
So the format for this evening is, first we're going to hear from a panel, which you can see up here, who see the critical need for family and medical leave, and then our guest, Senator Brown, will speak a bit more, and we will have time at the end for questions from folks here. So I am sure that many people in this room have struggled with the issues that we're going to talk about tonight, or you're going to hear about tonight. Maybe you recently had a baby, or you adopted, or maybe you're caring for an aging parent, or a partner who's ill. Most of us face these kind of events in our lives. And for far too many of us, we face really difficult, almost impossible choices when we get into these situations. And we're glad that New Hampshire and many other states in the country are working to find solutions. So according to the Federal Reserve Bank, 40% of us cannot face an unexpected $400 expense. This is in part because wages are not keeping up for a lot of working families, and they're living paycheck to paycheck. But to think about that, and for some of us in this room probably know that as our situation, that if something unexpected happened, we would not be able to sort of keep our finances together. So that we know that a problem, a health problem or a disability is what can push many of us into poverty. And losing income, even for a short period of time, can be really destabilizing to our families. So family and medical leave insurance can provide a temporary financial bridge and can help us maintain financial security while meeting the caregiving needs in our families. Some of us are single parents. Some of us, we're holding our families together with one income, or we're a two-person family with one person or both people working and trying to juggle all the daily joys and all the daily stresses that we face. Or someone in our family may be battling addiction and needs time off to go into rehab. And family and medical leave insurance should be there for all of us to relieve some of the financial strain of taking time off from work. We are grateful tonight to be joined by a panel of people from this community who will start this discussion for us. First, we have former state representative and the CEO of One Sky Community Services, which serves one of 10 regions in New Hampshire for individuals with developmental disabilities. Chris Munns.
Thank you, Jan, and welcome, Senator Brown.
Thank you, Chris.
I am the only member of my family that did not graduate from Winnicott High School, and I made up for that by serving on the school board for 3 years. So, prior to moving to New Hampshire, I grew up in that mitten-shaped state to the north of Ohio. And while I did not attend the University of Michigan, both of my kids were born in Ann Arbor, so I'm obligated to say, go blue.
Sorry. I don't take that personally. Congratulations to the Patriots. As a Browns fan, congratulations to the Patriots. So, you guys kind of win a lot of stuff. Boston Reds, I mean, it's just a little much, but go ahead. Plus you stole Kyrie Irving, but okay, never mind. Sorry, enough of that.
Sorry I opened that.
Yeah, way to go.
Yeah.
Chris, this is supposed to be a substantive discussion.
I'm trying to get
Jan did such a good job keeping it on the issues, and then you show up.
Okay. I am the CEO of One Sky Community Services, and we are a private nonprofit organization in New Hampshire that supports individuals with developmental disabilities and acquired brain disorders. We're very proud in New Hampshire of being the first state in the country to deinstitutionalize the care that was provided to individuals with developmental disabilities. We were the first state to allow people with those disabilities to live independently in the community. And that is our role. We are responsible for a region that includes most of Rockingham County, and we have a contract with the state of New Hampshire, and we administer the state-funded and the federal-funded Medicaid programs that support those individuals. New Hampshire, unlike a lot of other states where a state department would provide those services, New Hampshire entered into a private-public partnership with 9 other organizations like us to cover the state. We serve about 1,000 people, 1,000 families. We have an annual budget of about $30 million. Across the state, I think the system supports probably around 12,000, and the annual budget is closer to $400 million. Most of the support that the people that we work with, most of the people that we work with, we call them our clients, most of our clients continue to live at home. And the primary caregiver for those individuals is their family. And what we do is we supplement that support by getting funding so that they can hire people to come in and help them in the community. And we call those folks direct support professionals who take them out into the community. If one of those people is unable to come to work, it puts a tremendous stress on the family, because most of the families of the people we work with are struggling themselves. They're 2 income earners. And if the staff that's supposed to take care of a family member with a disability isn't able to show up, mom or dad has to stay home. And if you're an hourly employee, that means that you're going to lose pay. That's an immediate issue if it lasts for a day. It becomes a much longer issue if it goes on for longer periods of time. And you combine that with the fact that New Hampshire is facing this perfect storm of workforce-related issues. We have the 2nd oldest average population in the country, behind Maine. We're going for it, though. We have the lowest unemployment rate in New England. I think it's hovering around 2%. We have the highest cost of an in-state college education in the country, which leads to the highest average student debt in the country. And we have an incredibly difficult time finding staff. So what that does is it puts the families that we're working with in a lot of situations where they just can't find people on an ongoing basis, and they face the challenge of, do I care for my loved one or do I lose my job? And if they had paid family leave, that would really strengthen the safety net that exists and provide them with that extra support.
Well said.
So,
thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Chris. Next on our panel is Heather Carroll. Heather is the manager of public policy at the Alzheimer's Association of Massachusetts and New Hampshire chapter. She is a social worker and has been working in the field with elders for over 15 years and has a very good understanding of the importance and the challenges of caregiving.
So thank you very much, and welcome to New Hampshire,
Thanks,
Senator. We know that you are a leader when it comes to Alzheimer's disease in Congress currently. We are so appreciative of your support for the BOLD Infrastructure Act. That was an excellent bipartisan, if you can believe it or not, it was a bipartisan effort. Luckily for us, if you have a brain, you can be affected by this disease. We have 24,000 individuals currently with Alzheimer's and a couple thousand more with related brain disorders. 67,000 plus caregivers caring for those individuals, and they're giving 76 million hours of free care per year. As Chris had alluded to, the workforce issue here in New Hampshire for direct care staff is extremely tough. It also leads to the issue of staff that's trained properly to care for individuals with specific needs, which our disease process is a specific need. So we are, unfortunately, sometimes competing for people to come to work. And when you have that sort of situation happening, it leaves families without a lot of options other than to care for their loved one themselves. And we as an organization realized that being out of the paid family leave fight was just ridiculous for us. It was taking it to the other end of the spectrum. We heard lots about new moms and adoption and things, but we were like, wait, what about our people? Our people are dealing with this type of issue all the time. So 2 out of 3 of those family members are still in the workforce. And when we are talking to families, the thought process of having to take an early retirement because there is no workforce out there. So if we want to stay with our loved one with Alzheimer's or any form of dementia, we're looking at possible retirement, which means leaving the workforce and possibly leaving a really great job that had fantastic benefits. And the thought process of losing your job because you're out a lot, because you are currently caring for a loved one or taking doctor's appointments and things like that. And the thought of losing your insurance is mind-boggling for our families. I had a gentleman in yesterday who was talking about how if we had paid family leave, he would have job protection, where he felt he's on the older end of the spectrum, so he may be easily dismissed, and if that happened, his wife's prescription meds would jump dramatically if he lost his insurance. So, and her Aricept is the only thing keeping her home right now. And the thought of putting her in a nursing home is just the farthest thing from their thoughts. But our families who are dealing with Alzheimer's disease shouldn't have to think about possibly losing their jobs. Or can I keep my job and still have some time to do some transition? We have other families who, want to move their loved one home because it's not safe for them to be in the community any longer, and would love to have a couple weeks to just move that transition. We have another woman who's moving her mom, who's lived in her home in Bedford for 52 years, and now she has to transition into a little bit more structured care environment, and she doesn't have the time off from work to help her mom with that transition. We hear stories of kids caring for their parents and trying to make things work, especially when a hospital calls and says, your dad's broken his hip and we need you to come in because he needs to be on one-to-one because he has Alzheimer's disease. And he's very overstimulated in the hospital, but he has to stay here. Families are having these tough questions, and having to balance everything seems to be very complicated. And I think our folks would benefit just as much from having a very strong paid family leave bill here in New Hampshire, and federally would be fantastic as well, because then we could draw from that model. And would be great if New Hampshire was best practice and could pave the way for a very strong way of keeping our loved ones home. And I think that's also the New Hampshire way, is to be able to make our own choices no matter what happens in life.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Heather. Kathleen Murphy, who's next on our panel, is the superintendent of SAU 90, which is this district.
Correct.
And Kathleen is a leader in early childhood and STEM initiatives. She was named Superintendent of the Year in 2016, and she has been both a classroom teacher and a principal, and now she's a superintendent. Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Welcome to Hampton, a fabulous community, a community of families that are incredibly caring and devoted to their kids, their families, and their extended families. So I think you've found, if this is your first stop, it's a great first stop because it's a terrific community. I am a proud public school educator public school educator for 47 years, so I've had lots of experiences that have given me the focus on understanding the impact that families undergo every day. Most of our families recently are working. It's interesting, the change since that recession, and we see a lot of families working. But what we discovered was those families are working with very low-paid jobs. There are a lot of service jobs, hourly jobs, with very few benefits, without any coverage of insurance, so that we've had situations where we've had families come to us. Just recently, we had a single mom come to us. She was going to have surgery. She came to our office to talk to our social worker because she didn't know what she was going to do, because her pay was able to pay the rent and put food on the table and take care of the kids, but she knew that having surgery, she was going to be out of the workforce and she had no backup. And what was she to do? And again, I talk about Hampton, it rallies, it supports their families, but she was frantic because she knew that she didn't have the income to be able to support her. She knew that she was going to be out for 6 weeks with surgery and recuperation. And for us as educators, we don't work with just the students. We look at our work as families and students. And so when things happen in the family, it has a direct impact on the work that we do every day. We know that when families are in crisis, or there's stresses at home or anxieties, we know that that really has a significant impact on student learning. We've learned that when kids are stressed because of situations, their brain responds differently, and they're not the same student that we see every day in the classroom. And so we're always looking for ways in which to help families in any way we can, whether it's providing extra food. We have a program called 68 Hours for Hunger. We provide food for families on Friday. That's enough food. The 68 hours represents the time from hot lunch to breakfast on Monday morning, so that they have food, extra food. Again, that's a real community effort. But we know that those critical pieces of housing and food and clothing are critical for our kids. And when we can't do that, and we can't provide that support for families, it's really the kids that suffer. And I don't think we often think about that. When we think about paid family leave, we think of the adults. But the significant impact on children, we've seen that in a number of cases in our small community. We have a community of about 1,100 students, K-8, and then our students come to Winnicott High School for their high school experience. So we're always reaching out, trying to assist families, because we know how it will help kids.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much. Our final panelist who will speak and then introduce the senator again is State Senator and Dr. Tom Sherman. Senator Sherman, he represents this Senate District 24, which includes Hampton, and he is a gastroenterologist who's been a very, very active advocate of expanding Medicaid in New Hampshire. He's also serving currently on the state's task force investigating the Seacoast Cancer Cluster. Tom?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. After this summer with so much bike riding through your neighborhoods, this feels like my second home. So my background, as many of you know, I'm a GI doc over at Exeter, and when I was first elected to the House back in 2012, we started looking at expanding Medicaid. And as I learned more and more about expanding Medicaid, one of the most interesting factoids was a study that came out of the Oregon experience. And when they expanded Medicaid, which was, I won't go into the details of how they did it, but it was randomized. Half the population who was eligible got it and half didn't. So Harvard did an amazing amount of studying of that experience. And guess what the #1 earliest benefit was? Anybody know? Sort of. Mental health. mental health. In the first 2 years, mental health, which is related to the classroom, it's getting people back to school. It was the stability that having health coverage brought. The immediate benefit in the first 2 years was a benefit in depression, mental health, and financial stability. When we passed Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire, we saw that. You know, it takes a couple of years before hypertension, diabetes, and in my world, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease, and those kind of things catch up. But the immediate benefit is mental health. And if you listen to the panelists tonight, that's what they're talking about. Paid medical family leave is all about financial security. It's all about a reliable backstop. It's all about having a safety net that you can depend on. So last week, Senator Feltus, who's our majority leader in the Senate, introduced SB 1. And let me tell you a few things about SB 1, because this is really important. When I was on the campaign trail, I had multiple people talking to me about what a stress it was to not know what they would ever do if they got sick, or if their family member got sick, or their child got sick, and they had to take time off. The bulk of the people couldn't take time off, and if they did, they lost their job. And I think all of us are aware of that spiral. You lose your job, you lose your health care, you lose your health care, you lose your health, and all of a sudden you're declaring bankruptcy, you're losing your home or your apartment. So that downward spiral is what SB 1 is trying to help with. So SB 1 is insurance. It's no different from unemployment insurance. It is not a tax. By the way, the other point is that pregnancy is not a vacation. How many people here feel like pregnancy is a vacation? I haven't been pregnant, but my wife will tell you it's not a vacation. So the point is that this is not a tax. You're going to hear this is an income tax. It's not. This is insurance. And we have some really amazing examples of insurance where it started with the state, and a really good one is MedMal, medical malpractice insurance. If any of you are in healthcare and know what the JUA was, we couldn't get independent practitioners insured, so the state said, we'll step in. They stepped in until commercial insurers saw, well, this is actually viable. It's financially doable. So now those practitioners are insured through commercial products. So there is a role for the state. We do that with unemployment insurance right now. So it's insurance. It's universal. One of the concerns of Governor Sununu was that it did not involve state employees. SB 1 is everybody. The only people who are exempted are those people who work for companies that have a similar benefit, and then they are exempted. But the bottom line for the people of Hampton and the people of the Seacoast and the people of New Hampshire is that this is the financial stability that keeps you able to take care of your family and able to keep your job. And guess what? That's what's probably the most critical component in our workforce, right? If people can't show up to work, or they show up to work sick, or they show up to work stressed out because their child is sick, or their parent is in a hospital and they can't be there, that has a huge impact on workforce and wellness. So this is probably the Medicaid expansion of this session. This is the single most critical bill that we will be working on, and I'm so excited that we're talking about it today. Senator Brown, I went to Northwestern, so I don't know, that's another Big Ten school. I know Chris was talking about Michigan, but the good news is that Michigan and Ohio State used to just clobber us, so you have nothing to worry about.
Very true.
I have a full bio here, but you know, Senator Brown has done an amazing job in Ohio. And one of the most amazing parts is that in a state where President Trump won by 10 points, Senator Brown prevailed by 7 points in 2018. What that means is that he's in touch with his people. And what that also means is that he's a really good listener. So I'm glad this is a listening session.
Thank you.
But there are a couple of problems with his bio. He's a Cleveland Indians fan. I'm sorry.
But my email address, you will appreciate this, my email address is damn Yankees, so that's good enough.
Okay.
It really is. So.
Surprised I didn't get
But
you.
this Red Sox Nation stuff's a little much sometimes, but I'll leave it at that. My wife and I spent 3 miserable hours at Fenway Park in Game 6 when J.D. Drew, who had never had a clutch hit in his life, hit a grand slammer in the first inning, and you all remember that, and it basically ruined my life for a couple of years. Sorry.
Well, we're glad you've recovered and you came back. But there are a couple of points that I really want to bring out, because these were critical points for the Seacoast when I was going through the campaign process. One is he is a champion of a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to determine her own health choices. Second of all, and this is something that I really admire, when he was elected to the Senate, he did not go and use that platinum insurance plan. He waited until the Affordable Care Act was passed, and he gets his insurance through the exchange. So I think that deserves a round of applause. And some of you know that I'm chair of Health and Human Services in the Senate. I'm also vice chair of election law, so I really appreciate the work you've done on voting rights. So that's it for your bio. I'm sorry, I'm not going to read this whole thing. But thank you so much for coming and helping us bring this incredibly important topic to the forefront.
Thank you, and I really will be brief. She said we will hold lots of time for questions and also for comments, because I want to hear from people. But let me say a word about each panelist and what I just learned from you in many ways. The importance of Medicaid expansion. We have a Republican governor in Ohio who expanded Medicaid against the wishes of his party, and I was grateful for that. I have many disagreements with him, but I know what Medicaid expansion means to rural hospitals. I know what it means to care generally. I know what it means especially to mental health services, and the opioid issue probably is, the opioid public health crisis is almost as bad per capita in Ohio than it is in New Hampshire. And I know you, I work with Gene especially, and also Maggie on that issue, and how tragic it is for so many families. We have 11 people a day die of opioid overdose in Ohio. And I remember a day in Cincinnati at a similar kind of roundtable as this, where a gentleman whose daughter was sitting next to him, who had been in and out of treatment, he put his hand on her arm and he said she'd be dead without Medicaid expansion, without Medicaid, and that it's so important for mental health. So thank you for that. Jan, what you said about $400, that a huge part of the American public can't survive, can't deal without going to a payday lender if their car breaks down and they need to get to work, and what that says. And the most poignant example recently is we've all read during the Trump shutdown that 800,000 federal employees either worked without pay and had to still arrange child care and still arrange care sometimes of an elder, of someone with dementia, or had to pay their transportation, all that. There is, at least we got them back pay as we should have for all the stress that caused them. There are literally hundreds of thousands of contract workers who work for $12 and $13 and $14 an hour, but they don't work for the government. They work for Aramark or they work for Sodexo. There are people that prepare food at federal facilities. They clean the offices and the grounds, and they provide security, and they are not getting back pay. So it's 5 weeks without pay for people making $14 and $15. What happens in their lives, you can sort of predict. They go to payday lenders, they then go to the payday lender again and again, and they have a downward spiral that can lead to eviction or all the other horrible things. And we have an obligation to them, as we do to the families that all of you mentioned. And so thanks for your pointing that out. Chris, your comments about disability and aging population and safety net. Obviously, Medicaid matters, so does the legislation that you're all working on here, coupled with the highest student debt, is a pretty explosive situation. So thank you for bringing that out. And Heather, I was lucky enough, maybe, I think that's the right word. I was with both my parents when they were in their late 80s, several years apart, in home care. They were in home care at their home in Mansfield, Ohio, a town about half the size of Manchester, a little smaller than Nashua, a town of about 50,000 in north central Ohio, a town that's been hit hard by globalization, just like you along the Merrimack River from Lowell to Lawrence to Nashua to Manchester were hit so hard with. In the mill towns, we were hit the same way in a town like Mansfield, and I know what all that meant and how important the safety net is and how important the work that you all do. But I was lucky enough to be with my parents, but I had a job where I could be with them each of them the last day of their lives, and they didn't suffer from dementia, so it wasn't a 2 or 5 or 10 year process. But one of the best friends Connie and I have, her father had dementia, and her mother, who seemed healthy and strong, got weaker and less healthy as she cared for her father, and his problems got greater, and she actually, even though you never would have predicted it, her life ended before the father's life. And you see that all the time with caregivers, and with the additional stress of income and all that surely that means. So thank you for pointing that out. And Superintendent Murphy, thanks for 47 years. Is that what you said? Okay, that's well. Starting in middle school, you started teaching.
I was 10 when I got my first job. So you do the math.
But your comment really hit me. Cincinnati's one of the leading communities in the country that does something called communities, that have community schools. It's the wraparound services that you explained so perfectly, that it's not just taking care of students, it's obviously taking care of sometimes they need food pantries at the school or serving the school and need mental health services and all that in this day and age, maybe it's always been that way and we ignored those needs, but how important that is. And I love your 68-hour, I've never heard that, your 68 hours program. And last, Tom, thanks for making this SB1. I think that's symbolism. It's way more than symbolism. It's a priority, but the symbolism of making it SB1 tells cynics or skeptics, I'll be kinder, skeptics like the governor, and I can't believe he really said that about pregnancy. That was not.
He said that about leave, family leave, that it was
family
taking a vacation.
Okay.
It's like taking a vacation.
So obviously, I'll just let you all cogitate on that. Not my place to weigh in, but the symbolism in setting is number one priority, SB1. That in a legislative body always says something and means something, and it says that's our number one priority as the majority party, and that is really, really smart and really impressive and makes the chances of success that much greater. So I'll stop there and love to hear comments or questions, but especially comments, just thoughts and ideas. If I can open it up that way.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Cody has the microphone, so if you want to ask a question or make a comment.
And would you mind telling me, just tell us a little bit about yourself, whatever you're willing to, if you want, name and community where you grew up, whether you care about Northwestern and Ohio State, no, just anything you want to tell us, but then your comment or question. Okay, I don't care, that's fine, all right.
Okay, my name's Robin. My husband and I just retired here from New York State, Midwesterners to begin with.
New York State's in the Midwest?
No.
Okay,
it's
an
Illinois,
expansive view of
Indiana.
Okay.
Had a daughter that lived in Ohio for several years. So anyway, I'm an ACLU voter, and my big interest is in criminal justice reform and prison reform. So I have 3 questions for you related. First of all the states have different laws regarding restoration of voting rights for formerly incarcerated. Would you support restoring voting rights to people who are out of prison or even in prison? California lets you vote if you're in prison. 2, what would you do to alleviate mass incarceration? And 3, how would you help the formerly incarcerated to find living wage employment, which is a big reason why people recidivate? They can't earn enough money to keep themselves alive. So what's a
Sure.
person to do?
Take them in reverse order. Living wage for formerly incarcerated people. My wife is you should look at her on Facebook if you haven't, or on Twitter. She's a Pulitzer Prize winner, but before she won the Pulitzer, she was a Pulitzer finalist writing about a gentleman by the name of Michael Green, who had been wrongfully incarcerated for rape, not committed at the Cleveland Clinic, but not by him. And she followed him around in prison 12 years, honey? No, he was in prison 12. He was in prison 13 years. She followed him around for his first year out of prison and wrote a 19, 20, 21 page, installment in the front page. Several days series, okay. That was okay. And about before I knew her was when that happened, so 20 years ago, and about his challenges as trying to find a job with a dozen-year gap in his resume, if you will, and how hard that is for someone to find employment during that. It just means we need to focus on that more. Now, real briefly on the Cleveland Clinic. Partially, I don't take even most credit for this, but I make it a practice of calling large institutions in my state and encouraging them to adopt a $15 minimum wage. We do things legislatively, but Mitch McConnell's not going to do a $15 minimum wage. And I encourage large institutions, insurance companies, banks, large hospitals to adopt that. Cleveland Clinic did recently. Again, I take a bit of the credit. I've been pushing on that, but more to the point, they contract food service, custodial, and security, and many companies don't think of that as part of their company's employees. If you go to an airport, the people that push the wheelchairs work for sub-minimum wage and depend on tips, if you can believe that. And our Department of Labor doesn't seem to care. So that's part of this whole picture. Second question, mass incarceration. My colleague Cory Booker from New Jersey and Senator Durbin from Illinois is pushed the First Step Act. And it was just that, the First Step Act, but it's important. ACLU would say that much. I'd say it was a little bigger than that. I've also worked on Ban the Box, which is part of their reintegration back into society, that they can't ask about prior convictions as they go into the workplace. And I work with President Obama, first doing it by executive order, later by statute. And voting rights. I was Secretary of State and served with Bill Gardner, who I think's been Secretary of State since the Spanish-American War, and not quite, but I've been working on voting rights issues my whole life. When I was Secretary of State, elections officials and even Republican elected officials and those elections officials in those days, if they didn't really believe in expanding the franchise, they sure didn't fight. They didn't fight to restrict it like the Republican Party game plan seems to be too often now. We did all kinds of innovative things. My proudest was probably getting government agencies like the Unemployment Bureau to offer registration at the agency. But my most fun accomplishment, if you will, was I asked corporations all over Ohio that did business in Ohio to help us. And the McDonald's Corporation printed 1 million tray liners, the piece of paper on the plastic trays. So you'd go through and you could actually sign up to register to vote. And for years at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections or the Athens County Board of Elections, you could see registration forms with ketchup stains, but they still counted. So that's my history of voting rights. And Ohio is actually a pretty good, in spite of a Secretary of State that cares little about expanding the franchise and is sometimes aggressively done voter purges. We have had generally good laws. If you can actually vote in prison if you committed a misdemeanor. I'm not a lawyer, so bear with me here. Felons can't vote in prison. Misdemeanants can vote in prison. Felons, as soon as they're out of prison, can vote. So we have one of the best laws in the country on that. Not so good on some other issues on voting, but generally probably better than the average state, but not what it should be. So can somebody do an easier question than that?
Sorry, Senator, thank you for coming, and thank you for the family-friendly economy folks for organizing this. Sure. My name is Kevin Fleming, and I teach at this school, and I'm a member of the National Education Association in NEA, New Hampshire, and want to echo the educators' comment here, the perspective that while we would like family-friendly policies for us as employers or employees, we do appreciate it. You've seen things across the country where teachers have become more active and been demonstrative in their own maybe labor concerns. We have concerns for all of our support staff people, bus drivers, lunch ladies, all the folks that are in our school buildings. But we have it, as Superintendent Murphy said, well, so we know in our students, when there are family-friendly policies, there can be better learning. And that's what we appreciate you folks underscoring.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up.
Andy Morse. I teach at one of the community colleges in the area. What can you do about...
What do you teach?
What's that?
What do you teach?
History and government.
Okay.
Okay.
And which community college?
Northern Essex Community College in Haverhill. Okay. But it's in Massachusetts. We get a lot of students from New Hampshire. Yeah. So what can you do about the problem of student debt?
Yeah, Connie teaches at Kent State, her alma mater, which launched her journalism career, and she graduated, if I can say this. She was a working class kid, first in her family to go to college. All three of her siblings followed her going to college. She had virtually no dollar help from her parents, and tells the story, as so many first-generation kids do, when they call back home when they're facing a problem as a new student at Plymouth State or University of New Hampshire or even Dartmouth. They call home, and their parents so often don't have answers because they've not had that experience. And but Connie graduated with not much more than $1,000 in student debt, and that was years ago. So, and it's important that we recognize that. And I mean, you know what your question suggests, certainly what we've done to this generation of students who maybe put off marriage, put off having children partly because of the cost of child care, in addition just to paying the student debt, who are less likely to start a business, who are less likely to buy a house, all the things that we've inflicted on them, which causes damage to our economy long term. First of all, too many state governments, my own included, would rather cut taxes for rich people than they would invest in Bowling Green and University of Toledo and Akron U and Ohio State and OU and Miami. That's the first problem. Second is Congress hasn't nearly kept up on Pell Grants with what we should be doing, not even close. Third, we are working on a match where the federal, but this will take money, and President Trump and Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan have decided that a tax cut of $1.5 trillion, 70% going to the richest people in the country, is more important than investing in the next generation. You know all that. You're here. We've got to figure out how to assist in funding of state universities at a minimum, not that takes care of all the problems, obviously. Last, I worked with Senator Kennedy my first year in the Senate, first or second year, on allowing forgiveness of loans for people who did public service, and that could be anything from AmeriCorps to nursing to police officers to teaching at community college, or public school teaching or being a superintendent or whatever, and accelerate after 10 years. Debt is canceled. Whatever debt you haven't yet paid, this administration looks unkindly on that whole program and has done all they can to squeeze it. So. You should be able to renegotiate your loan, and that's, again, the banks have far too much power in making those decisions and keeping people under that economic duress, if you will. Thank you for the question. Hi, I saw you out in the hall. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you? My name's Keegan. I'm a student at Winnicott. I'm a senior. I'll be majoring next year in education, actually.
And what are you doing next year exactly?
College. I'm looking at Keene State College for music education. Yeah.
And you want to be a teacher?
Yeah, I want to be a high school music teacher.
Ooh, yeah. And Superintendent Murphy just promised you a job. If she's still superintendent in 4.5 years, 5 years, 5 years.
Oh, you're pushing it a little bit, Senator.
And not that there are any witnesses that heard her promise, but okay.
I wanted to ask you on your thoughts on young voters and your plan to empower and motivate my generation and generations around me to vote for people they believe in and causes that they believe in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like that as the last question. That's a good question. I mean, to say it's the future is obviously a cliche and not particularly meaningful, but I saw this year what happened. 50% more percentage, 50% turnout increase in voters under the age of 35 or 30, I'm not sure, 50% increase in turnout. This generation, I mean, you're younger than a millennial, but people from your age, you turned 18 yet, or you soon will, right? Okay. All right. And so that you know, you change the world by voting, and that's not really overstated. And this year, when you know your generation, people under 35, seem to be more public-minded, more interested in being full-fledged citizens than generations preceding, more political in the sense of issues and caring about climate change and guns and civil rights and women's rights and LGBT rights and all the things that are American values that this government seems in too many cases hostile to. So what you stand for and what you do really, really matters. So we saw a 50% increase in turnout. We know people that are under 30 might not be as partisan as they're not really Democrats, but they're progressive. And it's, frankly, if I could talk in political terms, it's malpractice on my party's part and my part if we can't help you connect the dots that you care about climate change. You understand it's the great moral issue of our generation. You understand climate change. You care about women's rights. You care about your LGBTQ friends. You care about those. If we can't help you connect the dot, that means 1, you should vote, and 2, you should vote for people that will go a different direction from this president. And so thank you for that question. And I'll tell you a real quick closing story that could have happened in New Hampshire because of the sophistication of New Hampshire voters, similar to the sophistication of Iowa voters. This story came from Barack Obama. And I called the president about a month ago and just talked to him about the thoughts about candidacy and all that, and he told me some interesting things, but here's one story real quick. His first trip, you know, President Obama was launched, it wasn't New Hampshire, as you know. His success was launched in Iowa. That's where he did very, very well, and in 2008 in the Iowa caucuses, and then not quite as well here, but obviously he's a nominee and elected. So he's flying back to Iowa for his first visit a month after he was president in this really nice big airplane. And he had with him his Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, who had been governor of Iowa, right? So Vilsack and Obama were flying into Iowa, first trip back. His press secretary in those days was named Robert Gibbs, if you remember that name. And Gibbs turns to the president and said, Mr. President, tell the new Secretary of Agriculture about that phone call you made in Iowa that day after a full day of campaigning. Obama laughed and he said, yeah, here's what happened. He said, Obama said, I just put in a day, 8 or 9 stops all over eastern Iowa. I was dead tired. I was done. And my young staff person pulls out let me use a prop here, pulls out a cell phone and said, Senator Obama, you need to make 5 more calls. He said, I'm done. I'm tired. I'm not making any phone calls. And he said, no, you got to call 5 people. And Senator Obama said, well, who, like labor leaders or New Hampshire county chairs or New Hampshire state senators or whatever, or state representatives? And his staff guy said, no, you've got to call 5 high school students. He said, high school students? I'm exhausted. And he said, no, these 5 students, these are all 18 years old, and they're all going to bring their friends to the Iowa caucuses next week. So President Obama takes the phone, calls, and he says, the woman answers the phone. He said, Barbara, this is Senator Obama. I want to talk to you about the caucuses next week. And she says, Barack, I'm busy. I'm in a yearbook meeting. I'll call you tomorrow. And that, for all you New Hampshire people, that story could have happened here and probably has. So the old, you know, I've only met him 3 times. I got to meet her a 4th time before I decide. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone.
I mean, it's so odd.
I wasn't sure if it was your vote or the chair. Thank you.
You said other family members, like our kids would. Yes, okay, that's what you said your wife.
This is an Indian name, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the tribe that lived here when the white folk came. So it's very nice to
see you. Thanks, Chris. It's nice to see you.
Nice to get it.
Sure.
So if you hand me your phone, I can take it. Oh, you got it. I'm gonna grab you for one too. 3, 2, 1. Great. Thank you. Great. With you. So great to have you here.
I have to go over here.
You do. Good luck on yesterday. 3 years.
It's just a big. I mean, I was elected in Scotland. They were 88 and 89, and they died fairly quickly, and it was awful, but it was not awful because I was literally
Still
with
had
both
that.
of them the day
And
they
they
died.
knew who you were.
And I was so lucky, and it's such a good memory in many ways, but it's also,
Senator, no, I'm Scott. We're with the Inquirer.
Oh, Scott, I'm sorry. I know you,
Grab a
Scott.
picture.
Okay.
I've been waiting for you.
Great, got a couple.
I
didn't want to clarify one thing.
All these folks have been waiting for you.
Nice to meet you. My name is Andy Cross. I'm from Massachusetts, but I would like to say I taught in a vocational technical high school. I was a mathematics teacher, and I'm retired. If you're talking about dignity of work, that's real dignity of work. I got kids that are making $75 an hour now being electricians and plumbers and everything that everybody needs.
They're union electricians, union.
Oh yeah.
Where was their
bricklayers and just one week.
I spoke to the mayor of Boston today. He was a labor agreement, the mayor of Boston. And we've been talking about these apprentice, it's such a, you control your retirement more, and the fact that young people that are bricklayers and pipe fitters, that they are willing to put dollars aside. They know what that means for health.
The reason I felt good teaching these kids is I knew they were going to have something when they get out. It wasn't, I'm not dissing CDS and all these other places, but if you go to a comprehensive high school and you have nothing to sell anybody, then you're not going to really be too successful. But if you go to a vocational technical high school, the people really have to get to really move themselves up, or an apprentice program. But the problem is, it's double the cost of what a comprehensive high school is, but we're able to do it in Massachusetts. So I just wanted to dignity of work.
All right, good to see you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Christine, how are you? Can I get through?
You don't remember me, but I used to be the CEO of the Organic Trade Association.
Oh yeah, when you come in,
I come in with Julia's
Right. I see Julia. I see her pretty often.
Yeah.
She's moved to Ohio. She was in California.
I know.
She lives in this little town.
Ohio.
It's a great little town.
Yeah,
and it's such a good. I mean, I think she lives in Worcester, Orville, because it's got the little college.
Right.
Maybe she lives in Akron.
Yeah.
But it's a great company.
Yeah, and I retired.
What are you doing now?
I retired.
And
I'm back here in New Hampshire.
Where were you living? In Washington?
I was in Alexandria. Yeah, the office was on the hill.
When did you retire? 3 years ago? 4 years ago?
Yeah, like 3 years ago. And I came home. Yeah, of course. So we can always come to see you.
Well, is it good? And the Smucker, the Smuckers are like total Republicans.
Oh, I know.
But I've worked with them well, and we have a great relationship.
Well,
and they're so good in the community.
Yeah.
And they've this is like their 5th generation.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Mark is in the,
it's Mark's a great guy.
Because usually by then,
the older 2 brothers, I mean, they finally said they're going to go home,
Richard and
Tim.
They hover. They're there.
Yeah, they're there.
They know what's going on, but Mark's running.
But Mark is a great guy.
He's such a good company.
Yeah, it really is.
Cool.
So I just wanted to say hello.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here in New Hampshire.
I'm so much glad to be here. Thanks. Can I slide through here? I would like. Just wanted to
break the wall.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
No, you didn't. High school or? High school.
I like to do my research. You study education jobs and my dad teaches.
I'm sorry, again?
Your master's in education.
Yeah, so I have a teaching degree, but I've never been a full-time teacher. Undergraduate Russian studies.
Where'd that come from?
I had a professor my freshman year that I learned the language. So you learned Spanish college,
starting in high school, and then through college.
Did you study abroad ever?
In Spain.
Spain. So you're teaching Spain Spanish?
Yeah.
Or most of the other teachers teach Latin Spanish?
Yeah. They ignore kind of the little subjects and that. But no, thank you.
Cool.
We hope to
Well,
see
thank
you
you.
more in New Hampshire.
All right.
Can I be a vandal sneak a
Sure,
selfie?
sure.
Yeah, we'll talk to you.
No, thanks again.
Thanks.
See you again soon.
Senator Mark Malone.
Representative Malone, nice to see you. How long you been in the House?
I just got retired from education at 40 years. I couldn't meet Kathy Murphy, but I'm a native.
So when do you get your $100 check? At the end of the year?
They pay us up front. I don't know why we didn't show up afterwards.
They pay you the first day?
$200, so it's about 2 weeks after.
So they pay for the whole session?
They pay us for the
So
whole
what if you,
session.
like, no offense, but drop dead or quit?
Or just
You got to give the money back? Yeah.
No. We keep it
How
all.
will they know if you show up? There's so many. They pay you on the first day?
When you go to
the
our
first
set,
day?
you have to sign in, and they actually have to press the button. So they actually
When you
keep
give you
track
the
of
check,
it.
did you think, does anybody think they're going to get paid $200 every week? Or they kind of want?
Oh, no. It's all eyes open.
It's in the
Oh, no,
Constitution.
and you can tell. I'll tell you, it's 400 of us, and we can be pretty wild at times. But I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're talking about working issues.
We don't.
This is the thing, is that we've got like 1,000 bills we're going to deal with at the State House, and it's hard to keep the focus because there's so much noise out there. You got to keep doing this. And anyway, also I'd love to have you come back and multiple chair of the Epping Democrats small town. But if you want to, do the 3 times visit or whatever.
So were you in this county?
Right off the main highway. Real quick.
Yeah. And then Will is next, and then we really do have to get on the road.
Okay, great.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And
Good luck.
and I hope to see you again.
Don't spend that money.
Artist Steve
Night.
Yeah.
So you're in school or what are you doing?
I am, I'm a student over at UNH.
You're with her. She's still taking
Yes,
pictures.
yes.
Good. Thanks for speaking out in front of us. It really is taking, there's this energy now in the party that really matters. So thank you for that. And getting, obviously Trump's not going to move on this week. If Pelosi moves on some of these issues, that will push McConnell and see what happens, and we build this momentum.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
It is, yes.
Senator.
Thanks, I got it.
Senator, I actually have one more question to ask, if that's all right.
Hold on, I'm sorry.
I wore my Cleveland pin for you, and I'm
grew up
from
in Shaker?
Ohio.
I'm sorry.
I didn't. I grew up in Akron.
High school where? Where'd you go to high school?
Copley High School.
Copley. You grew up in Copley then, not
No,
Akron.
I grew up in Fairlawn.
Oh, you grew up in Fairlawn.
Fairlawn, Summit Mall.
Fairlawn's a cool.
But I
Nice part of
coached
town.
softball with Connie.
Whoa, in Shaker?
Well,
you
I
with her?
worked at Hathaway.
I'm with her.
Hathaway Brown, and her daughter went to Laurel. My daughter went to
Went to Laurel and then moved to Shaker. Then started,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Did you see her already?
Yeah, I did. But I really hope our daughter is still there, and we now bought a condo in Bracknell.
Bracknell? That's a cool area.
Well,
I know.
but
They let us in.
We live in Massachusetts, and we're seriously considering changing our voter registration so we can vote in Ohio because it.
You might want to do it legally. You might know. I mean,
No, we are.
you
We
can do it legally. You can do it. I'm just checking. I don't want to encourage you.
Although,
no, if you have a place there.
Can we get a picture?
If I end up being a felon afterward, I
can still vote.
Yeah, that's right. Take your stickers off here. Okay.
Oh.
Stickers off of the
Oh, wait.
Wait.
Looks like I'm
Well, you can
grabbing
leave.
my-
Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3. All right,
Cool.
we should
Welcome to
start walking.
Bracknell. Bottom line is,
I
hope you have a nice to see you. Thank you for that.
Run.
Bill Moody mashing the grass up in Seabrook. 24 years.
You sound like you're from Hampshire. You got that.
I'm a Boston guy.
Oh, you're a Boston guy.
WPI come out, but I like to have a picture. I can put her on put it in my restaurant.
Your restaurant's where?
The Seabrook.
In
On the
Seabrook.
way, you run it through it on the way.
Yeah,
The best restaurant in Seabrook. Maybe the Seacoast. 44 years
Being
now.
running a restaurant strikes me as like the hardest job.
Believe me.
You got to be on all the time.
We're a dinosaur.
And you serve
I fight the corporates
directly. You
all the
serve.
time.
What do you serve? Everything?
Oh, yeah.
All day, all night.
Monday through Sunday. Breakfast on weekends. It's great. I like the dignity of work.
Well, we don't respect working. We don't.
Listen, my grandfather, World War I vet. He busted out into the drink, out of a job. WPA comes in, we're in progress. FBI gives him a job. He's able to put a piece of meat in front of my father, look in his eyes and say,
the worst side. That's the big
That's what happened.
You know,
And government helped in those things.
it's called the government.
Yeah.
Government's part of us.
This whole view that government, it's just tragic. And that's one of the things about Trump that we have to fix is the role of government in our lives and dignity and all that.
Most important, like I said. Thank you again.
I want to hear the comments you were forming.
Good New England name?
Yeah.
Ruth, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Well, we'll let him do it next time.
Good to see you.
You too. Thank you.